from this first episode called By Dawn's Early Light. And this is the spoiler-free section, by the way. And you can imagine my surprise when I saw, wait a minute, these are like kids playing. And like actually like, you know, get kind of, you know, not kind of like the lecture, but like kind of being educated on like the principles of being a superhero. And we're kind of like getting back to the ideas of what being a superhero actually means to the people. And I'm like, oh my God, are we actually not going into this idea of, oh my God, all superheroes are inherently evil because all they are is like the representation of the mass corporatization of our lives, and why are we worshiping these guys, you know? And basically, like, as much as I love The Boys, the entire reason why The Boys exist is literally just to make fun of comic book fans and kind of question why it is that they like superheroes in the first place. All right, let's be honest with ourselves, right? That's kind of like the inherent nature of what The Boys goes for. So I guess already off the bat, what impressed me about Jupiter's Legacy is it's able to tell a different kind of a superhero story while at the same time not spitting on the idea of loving superheroes, if that makes any sense, you know?
Yeah, I agree, because I think it doesn't have the snarky or aggressive undertones towards the audience that The Boys has, and I think it also doesn't have that sort of I'd say what I think makes Invincible so special is how it goes to that next extreme that you couldn't get away with if this wasn't animated, because it'd be a little too realistic. Like, I think the realism is perfect for the cartoony aspect of not just the fact that it's animated, but the way the writing sort of shakes down in Invincible. It's a bit cartoony. It's a bit more, I'd say, fantastical, not really tangible of this earth, right? And so I think this kind of treads the line of also being not as far, let's say, to one side as those two properties are, but also not taking sort of the generic route that we've seen with Marvel over and over again. I do, though, think that this show, now that I've seen 4 episodes, does suffer a little bit, because it kind of makes you realize, like, budget is kind of half the battle.
Yeah.
Because while I think the writing is already stronger than a majority of what I've seen from like the first halves, because I'm going to compare it to the first half since that's all I've seen of what's happening on Disney Plus in regards to WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier, the spectacle of it is very important when it comes to these types of shows and this genre of superheroes as a whole. And you know, it's like, if we thought that there were some moments of Falcon that looked underproduced, just understand that you're kind of with this show because you're here for the writing first and the spectacle second. I think they know that.
Yeah.
And that's why, at least where I'm at, the action has been very pivotal to the plot, not the other way around. You know, there's no opening Marvel sequence, guys, where it's like a random Falcon flying and fighting some terrorists just to establish the tone again. We can't afford that in this show. So if you like those types of things, this is not what you're coming here for. And so I don't want to give it too much credit, though, because I think the writing is still a little CW at times. But I think you kind of need to curve some expectations, and then you will begin to really enjoy this one, as I have.
Yes.
I'll let you riff off that.
No, I agree with that 1,000%. Like, I even said it in in my review of the first episode on guyatthemovies.com. Check that out if you haven't gotten a chance yet. Humble
plug.
brag, a subtle plug there, I know. Is that the action already off the bat, I'm like, oh no. You know, like, it was very CW, it was very hokey. It definitely looked like one of those like typical CW Toronto shot things. I'm like, so I made it clear very off the bat. I'm like, if you are
so
coming
Toronto.
Here, so Toronto. It's so funny how we're so used to that now, and I hate to keep taking shots at our neighbors to the north, but it has become so apparent now in all of these superhero CW shows that we've watched over the last almost like 7-8 years now, that it kind of becomes like impossible to ignore when you see it and how obvious it is. But as far as that goes, the thing that I've always given Netflix kind of credit for is the fact that they kind of have this understanding, definitely, that the action is specifically the spectacle action, I'll call it. Because when it comes to like just specific choreography, like with martial artists and stuff, they're up to here. That's their apex as far as that goes. But with the special effects, that's when it gets a little hokier, and that's when it gets to be like, oh, now we're showing our budget, you know. Which I think another telling sign of this show specifically is the fact that, like, so much of the rest of the budget is extravagant, you know? Like, even by kind of Netflix standards, like the flashback sequences that we have, because just to kind of give you guys an idea of the show. The show both simultaneously takes place in the present day, whatever year that is, I'm assuming 2020 or 2021, and also flashes back to the 1930s because it's a double story, which is showing kind of this family that's had superpowers since the 30s, named the Sampsons, right? They're led by the father figure / leader of the group known as the Utopian. He's played by Josh Duhamel. The whole thing is that in the present day, you've got him trying to adjust his two children, and in this case, all the other descendants of all the other superheroes that have kind of popped up over the last 80, 90 years now, in order to make sure that they're ready to kind of inherit the next stage of his of superheroes, while at the same time it's showing an origin story in the 30s of how they went from kind of these Wall Street kind of titans, captains of industry who were kind of really affected by the Great Depression, and how they kind of went on a journey of self-discovery on their own that eventually leads to them getting powers. Just as far as the brass tacks of what the story is,
right?
But as far as kind of immediately kind of what's willing to get me past kind of the hokey action, as far as the fact that Netflix is already putting a lot of money into this and into kind of the right places per se. Because I know we complained a lot about kind of how Netflix utilizes its resources, where it's wow, they're willing to sink how much money into that stupid CG dog and monkey for Space Force as a fucking joke.
Right.
But meanwhile, their superhero fight sequences still look like shit. That priorities as far as that goes.
I think while they obviously have sunk a lot of money into this, I don't think it's enough, because while I do think they're nailing the period piece aspect, you can kind of... So I'll use this one scene as an example. It's the scene where our main character is sort of on the street, life is good, and everyone starts running away. And everyone's like, get to the bank now, withdraw your money now, because the Great Depression just hit. And One thing I noticed in that scene was... it was very tight. There was no old cars driving by. There was only 2 cars parked to give you that, hey, we're in the 1920s. Yeah. They really could only afford those 2 cars.
Yeah, you're right. They can only afford that one spot for that one scene. They're like, okay, we only have a certain amount of time to shoot this. Let's go. They have that one street corner that they have blocked off on Toronto somewhere.
Yeah, it shows its hand. It does show its hand, but I think it's a testament to the filmmaking where that's not a big deal. It just kind of comes with the territory. And I think when you're in a field that has the majority of the highest grossing movies of all times are Marvel. So it's okay, there's going to be a disparity here. You're going to have to brace yourself for that. I actually don't think that is what I would say is the negative of it. In fact, I think that it's honestly, the way they're able to work with this budget is a testament to these filmmakers and what they're capable of and how effective they actually are able to be within their limitations. So I would give that as a huge prop to them, because my issues don't fall there. I do have issues, but while I have been noticing that and bringing it up, I just want the audience to know that's by means not a negative of mine. I just think it's important for people to realize, so we can kind of decide, do I like Marvel for the writing, or do I like Marvel for the spectacle?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree with that 100%. And another point that I wanted to bring up before we move on, as far as that goes, is in my review, I wrote that Netflix, again, has a really bad tendency of revealing their budget. Because Netflix, for the most part, it really only takes people like us in order to notice those specific scenes where it's oh, no, you definitely didn't have the budget in order to shoot that, But they definitely, I think it's safe to say, they're most revealing of their budget during the action sequences. I've seen it in all the Netflix shows. I've seen it in the Umbrella Academy. I've seen it in pretty much all their shows that involve action in some capacity, right? The only time, like I said, that they really were able to pull it off was in Daredevil, specifically that first season. But their action sequences, specifically the more spectacle-filled ones, are always going to be the sequences that are going to show off the low budget. But for me, at least, what I'm willing to give this show props for, again, based off of what I've seen, because I've only seen 3 episodes so far, is kind of already how it's going for kind of a different element of the superhero storytelling, right? So obviously, again, we go back to, what's been going on with the superhero genre, which is the idea of what Spielberg said of where it went to the Western, where the Western genre was so big and was so oversaturated and it's every aspect of our lives that it kind of just, that by the time, that it quite literally became too big for itself and ended up kind of collapsing and just going away. And now, again, name one Western movie that people our age, know about, that was made after, 1970. Exactly. You can't name one. And while I definitely don't think the superhero genre is going in that direction, as far as just because the superhero genre, I feel has one thing that the Western genre didn't, which is the internet, which will always keep up some facet of the superhero conversation going, even after they eventually leave the mainstream pop culture status. But what I like that this show is doing, which again, even though I express kind of the differences between this and other shows, is the same thing that I've given praise to The Boys, Invincible, and Watchmen for doing beforehand, which is actually having the balls, and I'll say that, to take the ideas, again, that I will say that Zack Snyder controversial a filmmaker as he has tried to do before DC just cut him out and be like, no, we can't have any of this thinking man's bullshit in our TV, in our movies. I will say that they are actually having the balls to go the extra step and being like, okay, why do we love superheroes? What is it that makes us look up to them, and doing it in a different way, in different ways, right? The Boys is all snark. It's all kind of putting them down, and it's all kind of like, why do you like superheroes, right? This asks the same question and is like, okay, we get that you like superheroes, but why? And it just balancing out kind of those themes of, having someone to look up to, role models, balancing out what role models kind of are in real life versus who they are as you perceive to be. The idea of constantly having to maintain that line. I know, obviously, again, because we've been so inundated with, I'll call it the gore porn aspects, that's kind of become a joke in and of itself, right? We love to laugh at Tony Stark coming out and saying he's Iron Man at the end of his origin story, kind of, again, puts all the Raimi movies that came before it to shame, where literally such a tremendous part of those movies was the fact that Peter Parker had to keep his identity secret to protect the ones he loved, and Tony Stark comes out and is like, hey, I'm rich, bitch, I don't give a fuck, So, the fact that Jupiter's Legacy is kind of bringing back some of those traditionalist elements, but not in like an overly corny, hokey way, the way that some of the more modern properties have kind of like gone out of their way to show, these things are stupid, why do they need them? It's like, I think that I'll say is at the end of the day, superheroes and comics in and of themselves, they've gone a long way, obviously, since their origin, but they were made for children inherently, and there's a reason why, typically, especially specifically me as well, why a lot of people typically gravitate towards more, not childlike, but more child-oriented storytelling, right? It's part of the reason why we love Star Wars, right? It's because at the end of the day, that is geared towards children. It's because we just get that sense of wholesome messaging, and I definitely feel like in today's day and age, we'll get obviously into the nitty-gritty of the show, I definitely think that's needed more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I think this show has, I'd say it leaves its CW-isms at the door in regards to the budget and sort of those things that the budget affects. Obviously, the action and the period piece aspects and the wardrobes and all that, not looking the greatest. But that's fine, because I think what this show does do is sort of play to its strengths. And the strength is Mark Millar's approach to writing stories and comics. So I think we can move into our next topic, because I kind of want to start that one off. I feel like it's kind of progressing to the Mark Millar of it all. So if you're cool with it, I think, guys, let us know your spoiler-free thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what you thought of the show so far. Don't ruin it. We're not fully caught up yet.
Yeah,
Be respectful to other people watching, but let us know where you're at. Let us know your thoughts. Leave a comment, like this video, subscribe to our channel, please. It would help us out a whole lot. Hit that bell so you can turn on notifications and never miss when we post content. We post content multiple times a week. We love doing this. We're here for you guys, and we hope that you will enjoy the rest of our clips of Jupiter's Legacy throughout the week. Now done.